Jeg lå ikke på speed på den. De refererer til engelsk. Nei, han ber at vi må ringe og referere før. Så han skal få klokka... Hva tid er det om risken skal på?
9:30.
Should be. Yeah, I think but yeah. Okay, so I just download it. Yeah. And then take this one, and thank you very much. Okay, så det stemmer nok det.
Nå ruller mitt med.
Nu vill han det.
Nu är han med. God morgon.
Er det flere lyd?
Det var ikke registrering, men han går inn i trening så skal han... For jeg har de tatt den.
Men jeg fikk beskjed... Nå drar jeg på den tiden.
Hei, jeg får sjekke med det.
Skal det være noe introduction?
Nei, god morgen da.
Leggen som er inn i en før til starten, så står det...
Skal du rett videre? Jeg skal møte vårt året. Så er du der? Det kan vi ta. Men det kan vi ta det etter det. Ok, så jeg skal få... Ja. Ja, ok. Og så skal han rykke etter meg. Ok, ja. Ja. Han er så digital på løsning.
Alle andre skal
Ja, men det var ikke så veldig med folk på salen. Men det ser du jo. Ikke måtvis.
October, I can just say, what did I tell you? This is how it is, changing from what we can call extreme weather 1 hour to blue sky and the most beautiful the next. And dare all, climate changes and wars are challenging the knowledge of city planning.
Yeah.
Our city was bombed during the World
Yep.
War II,
Okay.
and
Good.
85% of the buildings was destroyed. At that time, cool city planning was probably not a very well-known word. It was all about having a place to stay warm and dry. Today, it is, like we know, other questions that are challenging
I can
us.
see now.
And I am happy that in this conference, some of them are asked. The consequences of climate changes, sustainability and resistance is a theme here. Planning in the Arctic is a theme. Planning for the future need of energy, food, and for extreme weather. Planning for the with the possibilities that new technology and digital infrastructure gives us. But most of all, as I said to you
shadow
yesterday,
to your
planning
right
for
or
the
to your
future
left, but
generations,
I guess
for
it's
the
okay.
people of the future
It looks okay. Yeah.
for the kids.
Yeah.
For
Okay,
the
so
way
just keep this
they
open,
can
and
live their
if it
lives,
somehow fails,
how
we
they
go
can
immediately to
realize
the
good
virtual
lives.
meet room
To
during
meet all
live
this and to
during
give good
live
answers to
presentation.
difficult questions, we need
like a
wise city planners. And I am therefore very happy to welcome you all to Bodø, to the hosting city of Isocarp 2018, for the first time in the Arctic region. And we are very happy that Isocarp found us and that you choose us as your hosting city. Thank you so much. And I used to say that when people meet, magic thing can happen. And therefore, I hope that cold weather and cool planning can be combined with warm meetings with others, and that new friendships can be made during this week. And that you, in the future, can say, we met in Bodø. I wish you good luck with the conference, and I hope you will experience Northern Norway hospitality at its very best. And the natural and personal surroundings here in Bodø will create the best atmosphere for developing new knowledge about both planning and people. So, therefore, thank you so much and welcome to Bodø.
Thank you for such a warm welcome, Mayor. It's a real pleasure. Some of you might have seen yesterday morning, around the time you were registering, if you came in the morning, that there was a rainbow. Did any of you see the rainbow yesterday? A few of you saw the rainbow yesterday. So I was thinking when I saw the rainbow, that's extraordinarily good planning for our event. But last night, if you were able to attend the reception, you saw something really amazing. I mean, really heartfelt talks with the mayor and the secretary and the regional representative. Beautiful music and amazing cuisine. So we are in good hands, and we were good friends. So it was really lovely. I have two short announcements. At 11 o'clock today, there was a meeting called Planners for Climate Change. So many of you are busy at 11, but if you're too busy to attend that particular event, please catch up with one of the executive committee members. This is one of the reasons we're here, is this idea of Planners for Climate Change. It's a collaboration with Isocarp, UN Habitat, and many other global planning organizations. Also, this evening at 5 o'clock, we're having a forum, an open forum. We would love to have you attend and learn more about Isocarp. You will meet all of the executive committee. They will tell you a little bit about their programming. We'd like to answer your questions about Isocarp and global planning issues, and we would love to have you all as members. So I hope to see you at 5, if not sooner. Thank you.
Yes, and I would also like to thank you for hosting us, and it's not only the city, it's also the citizens, it's the proud citizens of Bodø, and we all experience this amazing hospitality everywhere we go. So this is really something to be proud of, and actually planning of this Congress was also very cool. We worked a lot, but I think it's really rewarding, and the team was great and very. And all that we wanted to do, we tried to do. I guess there were a lot of sleepless nights, but it's hard to say when sun is up all night. So I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for hosting us and wish you a very, very successful Congress with lots of interesting things happening. And also want to say that this year we are having new things. So you will have a keynote that is streamed online. Actually, this session is available right now live on YouTube. So you can share it with your network as well. So we are giving this Congress a new, better level, and this is also thanks to Buddha. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And I would like to ask you to stay for a second, Kabi. So with this Congress, I also wanted to start a kind of a tradition of passing on Isocarp from one host to the other. So for this week, I would give it to the mayor to keep in good hands.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you.
And then if you may pass it on to our next host, and I hope the host will be passing it on with all the experience, all the knowledge, and all the hospitality that we experience in every single place. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much to the mayor, the Isocarp president, and the vice president of Isocarp. Also, on behalf of the local organizing committee, Bodø Municipality and Visit Bodø, I would like to extend my welcome to you all, to Isocarp members, non-members, Congress delegates, and everyone that has taken the trip to Bodø and are joining our Congress. And also a special welcome to all our excellent speakers that will be entering the 7 different stages that we have for the next 3 days. I'm wishing you, buena suerte. And now, for our first speaker tonight, it's someone who has contributed greatly, actually, to this Congress happening and the recent developments of Bodø through the New City, New Airport project. And he's now serving the Norwegian government. Welcome, Mr. Daniel Bjerman Simonsen, Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries.
Good morning. Yeah, that's the usual and polite thing to do, is to respond. So let's try again. Good morning. Are you ready for some morning activities? I'm going to ask you some rhetorical questions, and you're going to answer yes, as loud as possible. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. Did you enjoy the local cuisine last night? Yes. Did you enjoy the stunning nature? Yes. Did you enjoy the fantastic culture? Yes. Louder. Did you enjoy the best speech my colleague have ever held? Do you think I can do better? Yes. Thank you. So now you're awake. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear friends, it's a great honor to be here with you today. The International Society of City and Regional Planners. And this great event for your 54th World Congress on Cool Planning. And I should know, Bodø is indeed cool. Yeah, Martin agrees. I grew up here. Bodø is my hometown. And I'm very proud that so many city and regional planners from all over the world choose to come to Bodø. That's how you pronounce it, right? Bodø. Bodø. Yeah. And in all modesty, what could be a better place to discuss our sustainable urban future? The Norway's most attractive city. You already heard that? It was in 2016 when I was still living here, of course. That was a joke. You're allowed to laugh. It proves that Bodø is indeed becoming an interesting place for future-oriented urban and regional planning. And truly, both Bodø and you guys have some important tasks ahead. And you truly hold a key to our sustainable future. And in my view, 2 of these keys are also typical for the participants here today: knowledge and cooperation. And the good news is that they're both renewable resources and truly needed for the green transition of our world. Before I was appointed Deputy Minister in the Trade of Industry, I was leading a very exciting project here in Bodø that some of you might have heard of. What's the name? New city, new airport. The city comes first, always. We just moved the airport, building a city. And some of you may have heard already, Bodø is an airport city. You probably noticed that when you arrived. And the project started with that we were at the crossroads in history. The armed forces were pulling out their activities after 70 years of protecting the high north. We needed a new runway, and we needed to regroup and think what to do in Bodø. We wanted to write the next chapter in our history. We decided to set out and save the world, nothing less. Or at least we thought that we could contribute to the urban green transition in the world with new knowledge, new solutions. We thought, why not make Bodø a testbed for modern, green, smart urban planning? A living lab for research of future cities, where we could explore new forms of transport planning, energy planning, and green city planning in harsh and rapid changing climate. I'm sure some of you already experienced that climate. We went to the mountaintop yesterday. Yeah, warm and dry. So that was what we did. This is one of the largest and most important and ambitious city development and infrastructure projects in Norway at the time. A playground for urban planners, engineers, architects, everyone with the interest of developing the human and environmental friendly city of the future. Our cities and urban areas are indeed important. For the green transition and the sustainable future we have to enter. They are, in fact, crucial. The battle of the green shift between green and brown is taking place in our cities. Today, more than half of the world's population live in urban areas, and the share is growing. In Norway, 8 out of 10 people live in urban areas. 8 out of 10. And we know that globally, 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions is produced in urban areas. 70% of all energy consumption is done in urban areas. 70% of all waste is produced in urban areas. Still, urban areas only cover 3% of the world's area. Cities are fundamentally smart if we develop them and use them right. So the cities are both the challenge and the solution for the green transition of our world. That is why you guys, urban planners, are so important. And that is why cities are in the middle of our aim to save the world. Nothing less. We have the resources. There's a great potential in our cities. We have to make smarter and greener buildings with less impact. We have to improve urban mining, and we have to make smarter energy and transport systems. Sustainable development is an absolute key for future success. Like the French president said to the US Congress, there is no planet B. There is no planet B. Are there any Americans here? I'm not going to mention Trump. Oh, yes, I did. But there is no planet B. So we need to reduce our footprint on this one. In all industries, in all sectors. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are clear. Like most of the world, Norway is committed to these goals because we want to and because we need to. I also believe that green economic development is possible if we do things right. So if you ask me, saving the world is the best business idea for the world. Even the Chinese agree, Trump doesn't. That was also a joke. To my American friend over there. Cheers. Well, it is. the best business idea for the world. We need a business in order to build a sustainable future. And here are the good news. Fortunately, green growth is no longer a contradiction in terms. It's becoming real. It's actually happening. There is no contradiction between saving the world and making a decent outcome and profit. It's possible to make money from solving major challenges in society. It is actually a good driving force. Saving the world is simply a brilliant business idea. That sounds very capitalistic, but it is still a good idea. That applies to all businesses and sectors. But of course, it puts our construction industry in a special position. It is completely, absolutely crucial to this task. We also know that construction accounts for about 40% of all energy consumption. And we see some very promising developments in this sector. We see new technology, new methods, and new materials. Our construction and building industries are becoming more green, and it's happening through knowledge and technology. I believe that innovation is the key to future success in Bodø, Norway, and the world. One example. At Brattørkaia in Trondheim, the third largest city in Norway, they are building a powerhouse which becomes the biggest new energy-positive building in Norway. Here in Little Bodø, the municipality and local industry is a part of a research center on zero-emission neighborhoods, where scientists, industry, urban planners, and public sector are working together to find a future solution for sustainable neighborhoods in the future. We need to put environment and climate at the center in all stages of the building process. This is the green transition in practice. Creating new knowledge and solutions. Green jobs is not a mystery. Some might say it's a mystery. What's a green job? An urban planner planning a sustainable neighborhood, that's a green job. An engineer projecting and zero-emission neighborhoods, that's a green job. An architect drawing a zero-emission house, a new home, that's a green job. Creating value, creating welfare, saving the world. That's why we're here. Our businesses and our industry are in a driving seat of this development, together with public sector and scientists. However, they're not alone. We are all in this together. After all, it's a dugnad. You know the word dugnad? Dugnad means common volunteer effort. It's a Norwegian word, and that's the best translation I can do. It's the most beautiful Norwegian word that we have. We volunteer to do things together. That's dugnad. You, the world-leading urban and regional planners, are in it. And the government will do our share. We will facilitate, support our industries through predictable framework conditions and strong green line through our policies for renewable and growth. For example, ambitious climate targets is very predictable framework, and they should be ambitious. Something to reach for, something to work for together. It is a challenging one, but also loaded with potential. We already see growing demand for clean energy and green technology. The Norwegian government wants to fuel this development through the use of public procurement and by heavy investments in research, innovation, and infrastructure. Both intellectual and physical in this region, North University is the most important intellectual infrastructure. Business and the North University must work close together in order to make business out of knowledge and deliver talent for the knowledge-intensive green jobs here in this region and also in the world. The green transition that we are entering is closely connected to the digital shift. In fact, the green shift depends on the digital shift. And that brings us to the importance of digital infrastructure, which is crucial to make productive cities, take new production back into the cities and make them smarter. We aim to integrate ICT across Norwegian society in order to improve it. It demands what you call a whole system approach. involving the whole government and all policies, public sector, scientists, urban planners, all together. And again, we need businesses to take a leading position. Because we know without new businesses, there will be no new green jobs. There will be no digital shift or green shift. And without the digital and the green shift, there will be no new green jobs to finance a sustainable welfare society in Norway and the world. No sustainable future, simple as that. I'm sure Mr. Rifkin will elaborate on the digital shift and the third industrial revolution shortly, and gives you more insight on these topics. So, dear friends, each and one of you have a very important job. Did you know that? Were you aware of that? Yes. Let's try again. Good morning. Were you aware that you have an important job? Ah, good. And we have all a very important job ahead of us. We are a part of the effort to save the world for the digital shift, for the green shift. In order to build a sustainable future welfare society, we need greener and smarter cities and urban areas. That should put some weight on your shoulders. But please feel no pressure. You, the world's leading urban and regional planners, are in the driving seat of this development. However, you're not alone. We are all in it together. After all, it is a dugnad. And the governments of the world will have to do our share. We have world-leading knowledge and expertise right here in this room. This conference is the place to meet, greet, share, and discuss the future of urban and regional planning and the possibilities it opens for a greener future. Right here, we have the knowledge, the experience, and the skill, and above all, we have the will. So make the best of it and enjoy it. Let's save the world together. It's a common effort. It's the dugnad of our time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to the Deputy Minister, Mr. Bjarman Simonsen. Our next speaker is someone who has put a great deal of work into making this Congress happen as well. He is this year's General Rapporteur and an Isocarp member for 34 years. Welcome to Duško. He's the Professor of Urban Planning and Design, the Dean of, sorry Duško, you can just enter the stage. Please come. He's the Dean of the Faculty for Built Environment, Arts and Science at BA Isago University in Botswana, correct?
That's right.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Raquel, and the audience. I don't do the stage movement for living. I mean, professors are a bit of a circus these days, but not to this extent. So I have to make myself comfortable here and make sure that my technology works. That seems to be on. That's fine. So here we go. In fact, I was reminded, I would like to have my team here on the stage as well. So would all the rapporteurs, please, all 6 pairs, 12 people who will be doing more work than me. I'll be parading around, but they will do the work. Please have them on the stage. I will introduce them later. We have about 20 minutes now until we get Mr. Rifkin on our video link, so I better go on. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard this. Kia ora koutou katoa. This is Maori language. Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand. And I thought I would use this phrase. It means greetings to all of you. I thought I would use this phrase to acknowledge the indigenous people of this part of the world. They were the first planners of this place a few thousand years ago. It's a real pleasure to be in Norway. As you know, I come from New Zealand, and in New Zealand we would like to think that we are the most beautiful country in the world. 5 days ago when I arrived, I started changing my mind. I hope nobody's watching this in New Zealand. I think New Zealand is number 2. But what particularly fascinates me about Norway is that this is the country that understands climate and weather. People here have been living with the weather for thousands of years. So it's a little bit arrogant of Isocarp actually to come here and talk about climate and weather. I think what I feel that what Norwegians really know kind of intimately is this profound truth that nature is bigger than us. I think if you want to survive in this environment, you have to know that all the time and treat nature with respect and try to understand how nature works so that you can actually adapt with your own behavior. So there are some profound lessons here to be learned in this harsh environment. Being trained as an architect, I've always been fascinated with Norwegian architecture, both the past and the contemporary, and also with apparently, I'm going to use some water, with the designs which are still only on paper. Yeah, thank you. See, my team is really supporting me. Thank you. Although not all of these fantastic designs are in the right place, in my view, if you believe in sea level rise. Thank you. I want to acknowledge the region of Nordland for being a great host. And of course, the city of Bodø, which we're still all learning, I think, how to pronounce properly. You've been a lovely host so far, and I can imagine for the rest of the week we will have a really great time here. So that's really nice. The program last night was spectacular. So what is the purpose of my introduction today? This is obviously just an introductory report, my sort of ongoing impressions of where this Congress is heading. I want to give you an update on the Congress theme. I will introduce the team and their tracks. I will comment, if we have time, on the keynote speakers. And then in the end, I will not conclude. I will leave you with a bit of a question like, well, what is actually the mission of Isocarp? What is Isocarp's mission and the mission of the planning profession in a warming world? That's what we really are here for. My full introductory report is, of course, in the program book, so you can read it there. I will just use some elements of it. I thought I would use a statement by the Secretary General of UN, Mr. Antonio Guterres, about 2 weeks ago, just before the General Assembly. He said this: the world risks crossing the point of no return on climate change, with disastrous consequences for people across the planet and the natural systems that sustain them. That was a pretty direct statement of where we're heading. He was kind of describing some kind of a reckless adventure we are on as humanity. Adventure usually has a kind of positive meaning, like it's something exciting and fun and so on. But he was referring to, I'm referring to a different kind of adventure, one that I think the famous, the legendary Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen, apparently he said adventure is just bad planning. He used the word planning. He obviously had an aversion to adventures, and in his business, of course, you would. So it seems like this is where we're heading as humanity, into some kind of a really crazy adventure with global warming. In my report, I have plenty of material this summer to refer to say, you know, what's going on with the weather worldwide. All these disasters, you will know about them. I'll not mention them. And then right now, as we speak, you know, yet another super typhoon is ravaging Japan, and it's massive. It's huge, and unfortunately, this time it just decided to kind of really follow the linear extent of Japan. So it looks like the entire country will be eventually affected by. And Japan is a country of 130 million people. So and then also last week we've had this Mediterranean hurricane Zorba, which caused huge damages in Greece and Turkey and Bulgaria. And most of you will know that hurricanes are not a normal thing in the Mediterranean. So funny things are happening in the south of Europe, and funny things are happening in the north of Europe. Sweden has had all these wildfires. Then we've heard about the wildfires in California, catastrophic. There have been heat records have been broken all over the northern hemisphere this summer. And the overall trend with the global temperature is not just that it's rising, but actually it's becoming a curve. In other words, it's accelerating. It's all happening faster. This is affecting not only air, atmosphere, it's affecting actually the oceans and the sea currents. And this part of the world, we are here, right? In this part of the world, actually there are some funny changes in the Gulf Stream. A lot of warm water in the North Atlantic is now invading Barents Sea and Norwegian Sea and creating different conditions for the Arctic ice. The volume of ice is significantly reduced. The coverage now is about half what it normally used to be. This is actually happening on Greenland, on the land as well. The permafrost is melting. This is causing increasing the emissions of greenhouse gases in this part of the world, particularly methane. And methane, as you know, is way more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So what we have now, what is being observed all over Siberia, is these bubbling of methane coming through the swamps and peat lakes and so on. And this is also now happening in the shallow seas of north of Russia. And scientists are discussing the possibility of billions of megatons of methane being released in like a single burp and changing the climate almost overnight on the planet. So some catastrophic surprises are now becoming quite possible. So this is what is happening in the natural environment. When we look at what we are doing as governments and organizations to stop this or reduce this, that's not looking very good either. Paris Agreement, is it working? The news from a few days ago, these are two different sources. One is Reuters, the other one is The Guardian. They both reporting on this coming report by Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The report apparently is making a statement about what we are doing to prevent catastrophic global warming. IPCC is ready to say this time the world's governments are nowhere near on track to meet their commitment to avoid global warming of more than 1.5 Celsius above the pre-industrial period. This is according to one author who was brave enough to speak to The Guardian. What is needed is a massive, immediate transformation in the way the world's population generates energy, uses transportation, and grows food. That will be required immediately if we want to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5. The forthcoming analysis is set to lay bare how remote this possibility is. We're not doing our homework at all. This is from IPCC. That's not a very radical organization. And then if you look at individual governments, there's a mixture of hypocrisy and cynicism around climate change and no action at all. So as a result of that, we're now observing in the mainstream media an open discussion of catastrophe, apocalypse, end of the world, learning how to live in this hothouse Earth, which is 3 or 4 degrees warmer than is normal. This is now being openly debated in the media. Serious analysts are discussing the root causes of it. They go really outside of the realm of normal planning discourse. They have to do with politics. They have to do with the fundamentals of our economic systems. And all we can do as planners is, as citizens, of course, we can take part in the political debate, but as planners, we can only wonder whether it is ethical anymore to support projects like this and this whole idea of endless growth. So, in trying to make some sense in my report, I have said that the situation with the global climate system is indeed alarming. No more are we facing the prospect of climate change. The climate has changed. In this new reality, what concerns our profession is that cities and towns worldwide will face the consequences in a disproportionate way. Not only because urban areas now contain more than half of the human population, but also because urban inhabitants are heavily dependent on that clever human invention called urban infrastructure. We've really tied ourselves to urban infrastructure. Billions depend on it every day. The trouble with urban infrastructure, of course, is that when it works, it's good, life is good and easy, but when it gets destroyed or disabled in some weather-related catastrophe, then life quickly turns to hell. So we've seen scenes like this in the media, particularly this summer, cities particularly being affected by harsh conditions and basically not being able to function. Scenes like this from the urban environments are now becoming kind of like normal. The level of risk the cities are facing is bigger than ever. So the 54th Congress of Isocarp is about 500 planners from all over the world will gathering in Bude for 5 days to try to answer the two big questions of the 21st century urbanism. How can we make cities more sustainable and thus prevent even more global warming, given that cities are heat engines? And how can we make cities more resilient so that they can withstand the shocks and crises that seem inevitable regardless of how soon we take drastic actions to curb our carbon emissions? These are the two big questions. So I will leave it, in the interest of time, I will have to skip elements of this discussion in order to introduce my team. I want you to think about this balance of this relationship between adaptation and mitigation and sustainability and resilience. We have to have a position on it as planners. These are some basic Congress statistics. My team, the Congress team. Well, the entire Congress team actually is the Vice President, Slavek Ledvony, who I think Slavek has done a heroic work in the past half year, if not longer, probably a year actually. Amazing what goes into the organization of a Congress. Our Executive Secretary, Gabi Kurth, I really want to give her a credit for fantastic coordination of all sorts of loose ends and incredible patience. Thank you, Gabi. Myself, not so much. Yeah. And at last, my team, the rapporteurs. So I will show you later their pictures and then you can recognize them. Kate Holmquist and Evren Ulker Kachar for track 1. Kevin King and Sofia Morgado for track 2. Track 3, Lena Neal and Eric Hoibretz. Track 4, Maria Fernandez Maldonado and Adriano Pisello. Track 5, Ali Adrouf and Nupur Proti. And track 6, Frank de Hond and Andreas Schneider. I have their summaries of what their sessions are. So this is Kate and Evren from United States. And this is what their track is about. I'm sorry, I have to go on with this. These are the 6 sessions. You will find it all in the program. In track 1, global overview. Track 2 is about the spotlight cities. Kevin and Sophia. This is about planning for coastal cities, remote towns, and high north cities, places like Bude. They have 5 sessions in track 2. Track 3, Eric and Lena, climate-proof cities. This is what track 3 is about, very, very quickly. Weather-proofing cities, and they have 7 sessions. Track 4, Maria and Adriano. This is about technology and infrastructure, clean, green, smart, and resilient infrastructure. That has to become our aspiration. That's what this session, this track is about. And they have 4 sessions. Track 5, Ali and Nupur. Social networks. This is about citizen participation, urban governance, and cultural transformation. And lastly, the miscellaneous, this is still social networks, 6 sessions. And Frank and Andreas with track 6, which is the about current contemporary planning practice and not necessarily about climate change. So this is a, very quick overview of what the 6 tracks are about. Then we also have a number of special sessions. And of course, our host city has a number of sessions, and the BiLab venue, which is kind of like a parallel program, which will be very exciting as well. And I think I now only have time to introduce the keynote speakers, Jeremy Rifkin, Peter Newman, and Herbert Girardet. I think Peter and Herbert are with us in the room somewhere. Hello. And Jeremy Rifkin will be with us in a few minutes through the video link. I think we are extremely fortunate to have such distinguished and globally recognized experts on cities and technology and future. We really are privileged. Very quickly, what their excuse me, what their subjects are about. Herbert Girardet will explain the concept of the regenerative city. These are the key points. Peter Newman will speak about the renewable city. And of course, Jeremy Rifkin will talk about the 3rd industrial revolution. I have taken the liberty here of highlighting some elements of his interview. You can see them. I think he's making the same point about sustainability and resilience. And what I find particularly useful for our discussions, he says, it's inclined towards that the 3rd industrial revolution is inclined towards a highly diverse and distributed infrastructure. Highly diverse and distributed infrastructure. This is very important for resilience. The more diverse, redundant, and distributed the networks and systems are, the more resilient the infrastructure is, and the less vulnerable it is to cybercrime, cyberterrorism, or natural disasters for climate change. There's a very important message there for planning. So again, resilience versus sustainability. How do we combine the two, and which one is a bigger priority? In conclusion, I want to kind of return to the words of the UN General Secretary. As clearly stated in the call for papers, the root cause of and the solution to the global climate crisis are fundamentally urban. In plain language, cities will determine the fate of the world. Their rampant metabolism is powerful enough to throw the entire biosphere into a death spiral. And this could happen well before 2100. But their extraordinary concentration of human intelligence, us planners included definitely, offers the hope that we will figure out how to save ourselves before breaching the point of no return, of which the UN General Secretary warned us on the 10th of September. We're coming to the realization that cool cities are a historical imperative. Either our cities get cooler or our planet gets warmer. This imperative will not happen by itself. It's a task which must be planned. This makes urban planning the coolest profession on the planet. And I think we should all be proud to be members of that profession. My last point is purely practical. What is the difference between a conference and a congress? Well, it's obvious. At conferences, people confer. At congresses, people congregate. So we're here physically together to congregate, to be friends, to make friends, to network, and to have some fun along the way. I tried to find a clever quote from legendary Henry Gibson to finish my presentation, and I found this one. But he didn't say that. There was a woman who said that, actually. The opposite of happiness is not sadness, it's boredom. Please don't be bored during this conference. Have a good time, because only in good time we can actually innovate and create something new. The words are from his heroine, Hedda Gabler. That's where the quote is from. So it's not Henry Gibson, it's her. Thank you very much for your attention. Shall we?
Thank you very much, Duško, for this very thorough presentation. And also thank you very much for explaining the difference between congress and conference, because I had so many questions and I didn't really have the excellent answer that you gave. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce this year's first keynote speaker, Mr. Jeremy Rifkin. Mr. Rifkin is an advisor to the EU and the People's Republic of China. His recent books include The Zero Marginal Cost of Society, The Internet of Things, The Collaborative Commons, The Eclipse of Capitalism and the Third Industrial Revolution, How Lateral Power is Transforming Energy, the Economy, and the World. He's also the executive producer and narrator of the new film, The Third Industrial Revolution, a radical new sharing economy produced by Vice Media, and it's now available in 19 languages on YouTube. Mr. Rifkin will be joining us from Washington, D.C. live, so I hope they are awake. Welcome to Mr. Rifkin.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? We're on, and I assume you can hear me. Is that correct? I cannot hear. Can you just let me know that you can hear me from your end, please? Okay, we're good. Just hold on just a minute. Craig? I can't hear from the room. They can hear me, though, now? We're okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, good. Anyway, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with urban planners and regional planners from around the world this morning. I'm going to start on a rather somber note, and I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. Here's the context. This is what's becoming clear. GDP is growing at a slower rate all over the world, every region. And the reason this is happening is productivity has been declining in every region of the world for the last 15, 20 years. The result is unemployment is very high, especially among the young millennials trying to find a place in a 21st century workforce. Our economists are projecting 20 more years of low productivity and slow growth. And let me do the numbers for you. After two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, here's where we stand this morning. Arguably, 50% of the human race, most of us, are doing far better than our ancestors did before the industrial way of life. I think that's assumed. But I think it's also fair to say that 40% of the human race this morning, making $2 a day or less, are only appreciably better off than their ancestors were. And for the 1 billion people making $1 a day or less, I think we can make the argument they're no better off than their ancestors were before the industrial age. So while half the human race is doing quite well, the other half of the human race only marginally well, the very rich among us have really, really done well. This morning, the 7 richest people in the world, this morning, their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human beings living on Earth. That's 3.5 billion people. There's something so dysfunctional about the way our human family is organizing its economic life. The level of inequality is unprecedented in human history. It's clear we're seeing a long-term decline in the 20th century industrial revolution. We can sense it. But now we have a more profound crisis. After 2 centuries and 2 industrial revolutions, we've spewed massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere of this blue planet. And now we are in real-time climate change. This is no longer a theory or looming on the horizon. Climate change is now here in real time. And here's what's terrifying about climate change. I want to spend a moment on this because what I'm about to say is never described. If people understood what the impact of climate change is on our planet, the whole human race would be motivated, driven to do one thing: save the earth, save their children, save our fellow creatures. Here's what we're never told. Climate change changes the water cycles of the earth. That's what this is all about. We are the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the hydrological cycle, the water that flows across our ecosystems in our clouds. And here's the rub. For every 1 degree that the temperature of the planet goes up because of global warming emissions, the atmosphere is actually sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing that precipitation into the clouds, and we're getting more concentrated precipitation in the clouds and more violent, extreme, dramatic, and unpredictable water events. Blockbuster winter snows. We had 8 feet in Boston 2 seasons ago. This is happening around the world. Massive flooding in the spring. We just had massive floods in our country and continents around the world this year, destroying infrastructure and killing human beings. Summer wildfires and droughts. California was on fire all summer. Lots of people lost their homes. People lost their lives. We have Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes devastating the planet. All of North Carolina has been underwater now for several weeks because of the most recent hurricane. Our ecosystems cannot catch up to the runaway water cycle. The hydrological system of the Earth is on an exponential curve, and our ecosystems are collapsing because of the shift in the water cycling the Earth. That's exactly what this is all about. And so our scientists now tell us that we are in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth, and it doesn't even make the headlines. Only a handful of people in the world even know this is happening, even though this is the most dramatic story ever to face the human family. We've had 5 major extinction events in this planet in the last 450 million years, well before humans were here. And each time there was a tipping point in the chemistry of the planet and massive die-out. And it took on the average 10 million years each time to bring new life back to Earth. We are now in the 6th extinction event, and our scientists tell us that we could lose up to 50% of our species of life on Earth in the next 7 to 8 decades. Let me be clear. The last time we had an extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago. As my wife says, we are asleep. We are not experiencing the enormity of this moment. We're greenwashing. Every city in the world can tell us about very nice pilot projects to help green their urban and regional environments, but we are not scaling in an infrastructure in time to arrest the climate crisis. So where do we go from here? We need a new economic vision for the world. It needs to be compelling. We need a game plan to deliver on that vision, and it needs to come quick, both in the developing countries and in the industrial nations. We're going to have to be off the carbon deposits in the next 30 to 40 years, completely off, if we have any chance of avoiding the abyss. We're not going to reverse climate change, as the planners in this room know. What we've done is, in this age of the Anthropocene, will affect generations to come for hundreds of thousands of years. But we may be able to avoid the abyss and begin to chart a new journey for the human race, hopefully begin to reflourish the earth in which we live. So what we need to do, urban and regional planners, we need to step back and ask the question, how do the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur? If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap for urban and regional planning that's going to allow us to chart a new journey for the human race very quickly in the next few years. There have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history. They're very interesting anthropologically. They share a common denominator. And that is, at a moment of time, 3 defining technologies will emerge across a civilization and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform, an infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way society manages, powers, and moves economic life, social life, and governance. What are those 3 technology revolutions? First, new communication technologies to more efficiently manage our economic and social life and governance. That's obvious. Second, new sources of energy to more efficiently power our economic life, our social life and governance. Obvious. And third, new modes of mobility, transportation, and logistics to more efficiently move our economic life, our social life, and governance. Obvious. When communication revolutions converge with new energy regimes, new modes of mobility, transportation, logistics, it does fundamentally change the way society manages, powers, and moves its economic, social life, and governance. These paradigm shifts actually change our temporal spatial orientation. They change our business model. They change our governance. They change our cognition. They change our worldviews. Let me give you 2 quick examples. The first industrial revolution in the 19th century, second industrial revolution in the 20th century. The Brits take us into that first industrial revolution with a convergence of communication, energy, and mobility to manage, power, and move the British Isles. The Brits invent steam power printing. No more German manual print presses. Steam power printing was a huge leap forward in productivity. We could produce very cheap textbooks for public school education, newspapers, magazines, periodicals, a vast communication revolution. In the last half of the 19th century, the Brits introduced the telegraph system across the British Isles. Steam power printing and the telegraph in Britain converged with a new source of energy, cheap British coal, harvested by the steam engine, a British invention. And then the Brits put that steam engine on rails, locomotives, railroads, national transport, urban hub-to-hub industrial life. 20th century United States, second industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and mobility to manage, power, and move society. The telephone. I know we think the internet's a big deal, but the telephone, it was extraordinary. Imagine for the first time in history, the human race connecting each other virtually at very low cost at the speed of light and communicating. Later, radio and television. In the United States, those communication technologies converge with a new source of energy, cheap Texas oil. Then Henry Ford put everyone on the road with the internal combustion engine, cars, buses, trucks, urban to suburban life, interstate highway systems, shopping malls, travel and tourism, etc. That second industrial revolution took the world through the 20th century, and it peaked July 2008. If you remember that month, that's when Brent crude oil hit a record of $147 a barrel on world markets. And when that spiked to 147 a barrel, that month, the entire global economy shut down, July 2008. That was the economic earthquake of the industrial era. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later, that was an aftershock. You couldn't keep that fictional debt-ridden subprime mortgage economy alive when the real economy turned down. And why was that the earthquake? The whole world depends on the carbon deposits of the previous period in history. Our fertilizers, our pesticides, our construction materials, our pharmaceutical products, our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, heat and light, it's all made out of and moved by the assets of the Carboniferous era. So when oil starts to go over 80 a barrel, all the other prices go up. And when oil hits about 110 a barrel, prices become high for everything else. Purchasing power slows. We are now in a convulsive sunset of growth shutdown, growth shutdown. Oil goes down to 30 a barrel as the oil industry competes with shale gas and tar sands. They're fighting each other on an end game. Then when bankruptcies happen in the tar sand and shale gas industry, oil prices go back up to 80, 85 a barrel. This is a convulsive period in world history. I don't think anyone in this room today believes we're in the sunrise of the fossil fuel era. So where do we go from here? It's clear that we are in economic decline, and now we are in an extinction event. Let me share an anecdote with everybody this morning. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first few weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs on her watch. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged in to a second industrial revolution infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion road, rail, water, and air transport, and that infrastructure to manage, power, and move Germany peaked in its productivity over a decade or two ago. This is the key. There are three ways to define productivity. More capital for better machines, and better performing workers are the ones we're most used to, but that's only about 14% of the productivity. Most of the rest of productivity is what we call aggregate efficiency. Engineers in the room will know what this term is. From a thermodynamic perspective, aggregate efficiency is the ratio of potential work to the actual useful work that gets embedded into a good or service at every step along the value chain and supply chains. So what I told the chancellor, and she's a physicist, I said, look, the United States went from 3% aggregate efficiency in 1903 at the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution, and we got up to about 14% aggregate efficiency by the late 1990s. That was our ceiling. Nothing's changed. Germany got up to about 18.5% aggregate efficiency a number of years later. That was its ceiling. Nothing's changed. Japan led the world at about 20% aggregate efficiency back around the late 1990s. Nothing's changed. So what I said to the chancellor, you can have market reforms, labor reforms, fiscal reforms. You can stimulate 1 million entrepreneurial startups. It's not going to make a damn bit of difference as long as your businesses are plugged into a second industrial revolution infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion transport to manage power and move and light. So on that, it's about a third industrial revolution for ability to manage power and move Germany. And at the end of the day, the chancellor said, Mr. Rifkin, we will have this third industrial revolution for Germany. And I'll come back to this in a few moments where we are now, 11 or 12 years later. We are on the cusp of a digital third industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution was steam power. The second was analog electricity. The third is digital. A new convergence of communication, energy, and mobility. The communication internet is here. It's a vast leap in communications. We have 3.5 billion people now connected on the internet, and pretty soon everybody will be connected within the next 10, 15 years. The Chinese now have a smartphone for $25 with more computing power than sent our astronauts to the moon. So there are literally villages in the Amazon today with iPhones that have more computing power in their hands than sent our guys to outer space. Now this communication internet is just beginning to converge in Europe and the People's Republic of China with a digitalized renewable energy internet. Our electric utilities are moving from a servo-mechanical to a digitalized energy internet, and already we have in Europe and China millions of people and companies who are producing their own solar and wind electricity on site, using it on site, and they're sending their surplus electricity back on this digital energy internet. Just like they share information on the communication internet, they're beginning to share energy, renewable energy, on the energy internet. Now these two internets, the communication internet and the renewable energy internet, both digital, are combining and converging with a third internet, a digitalized, automated, and GPS-guided, Galileo-guided mobility, transportation, logistics internet made of electric and fuel cell vehicles powered by solar and wind electricity. Those vehicles are 3D printed with composite materials. That's already happening with the major automakers. They're experimenting now. And those vehicles on road, rail, water, and air will be driverless and autonomous over the next decade. These three digital internets, the communication internet already here, the renewable energy internet now emerging quickly, and the mobility internet already emerging, they ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We are placing sensors across our urban environment and our agricultural environment and the wild. So we have sensors in the agricultural fields monitoring crops. We have sensors in the factory floor, in smart homes, in smart vehicles, in smart warehouses, in smart road systems. They're picking up data in real time on activity. And where's that data going? Not to the cloud, this mysterious metaphor. It's going to the communication internet, the emerging energy internet, the emerging mobility internet, so that in every community in the world we can better manage, power, and move economic activity, social activity across our value chains. By 2030, we will have a ubiquitous smart world, total interconnectivity. In a sense, Galileo and GPS are the brain that synchronize the nervous system of the planet, which is our sensors, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is the built environment. That is, every building is going to have to be retrofitted in your communities so they can be made efficient. Then they be turned into a node. And those buildings, homes, offices, factories, barns, and sheds, as nodes, they become distributed data centers. So it's not, the data is not all collected by Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Berners-Lee, who founded the World Wide Web, is going to be announcing this week an alternative to these commodified, monopolized internet companies. So every building is going to become a distributed data center. And every building and site and neighborhood becomes a micro power generation site. And every building across the environment becomes a charging station for your electric and fuel cell vehicles. So those buildings are nodes, they're digitalized, and they connect like Wi-Fi across urban, rural, and continental spaces. This essentially is the third industrial revolution. Communication internet, the renewable energy internet, the mobility internet, all digital, riding on top of the Internet of Things, which connects all of our buildings as nodal points across continents. This is what we call a smart world, and it moves us from globalization to glocalization. In globalization, the first and second industrial revolution platforms were architecturally designed to be centralized, top-down, to be controlled by intellectual property, and to vertically scale in order to return investments to shareholders. But what's interesting about this third industrial revolution infrastructure, this general purpose platform, is it's designed to be distributed, not centralized. It works best if it's open and transparent to get the network effect and not intellectually closed with property. And it scales laterally, and it's distributed in form rather than vertically integrated. Now, you can try to monopolize it, which governments and companies are trying to do, but you lose the productivity. You lose the network effect. So this is the framework, and then the question is, where do we go from here? This is a great leap forward for humanity. We're creating a brain and a nervous system to extend the human family, and this means a vast potential expansion of social entrepreneurialism. It means everybody can become a player in a globalized world, which is lateral and distributed. Every city, every region, every rural area can become its own nodal point and connect globally, both virtually and physically, with anyone else in the world, and blockchain a whole multitude of economic, social relationships, and even new governing patterns in this new era. That's the upside. Then there's the downside, the dark net. And the dark net is as impressive as the bright net, and this is something all of the urban planners are going to have to deal with in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm sure you already are. How do we maintain network neutrality when everyone's connected? How do we ensure governments don't purloin this Internet of Things, this third industrial revolution, for political purposes like hacking the U.S. presidential elections last time? How do we ensure Internet companies and other companies do not monopolize this global infrastructure to commodify each of our lives in terms of data for third parties to use? How do we protect privacy and data security? How do we ensure against cybercrime, cyber terrorism, and climate events? This is the dark net. And we're going to have to spend as much time in each urban area in developing a distributed, redundant set of digital infrastructures so that any place or any time that there is a climate event or a terrorist event, we can go off-grid, we can reassemble, we can decentralize, we can reaggregate. And if we have a redundant, distributed Internet across a globalized world, it's much more resilient, if you will, against any centralized events, whether it's a climate event or cybercrime or cyber terrorism. Let's assume we are going to be able to muddle through the dark net, and it's a big if. Here's the benefit of the bright net. Let's say you're a small or medium-sized business in Norway. You can already begin to go up on this Internet of Things, this third industrial revolution, and get a picture of all the data flowing through the value chains. Then you can take the data you care about in your business and strip it out from all the data flowing through the system. Strip it out. Then mine that data with your own analytics. Create your own algorithms and apps so in your business you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency, which is most of productivity, increase your productivity, reduce your fixed and marginal cost, and be able to lower your ecological footprint because in each conversion you're getting more out of less of the earth. That's aggregate efficiency. And what's happening is you'll be able to reduce your costs to such a low level that it's forcing a change in the capitalist system. That's what's going on now. I'm working with companies all over the world, and they are in vast disruption right now because the digital revolution really reduces your marginal cost of production. When your marginal costs go down, your profits go down. So markets are too slow. A seller, a buyer, a transaction, you stop. And then another seller, a buyer, a transaction, you stop. We're moving from markets to networks, from ownership to access, from sellers and buyers to providers and users. We are moving from consumerism to sustainability because the digital revolution allows us to dramatically reduce fixed and marginal costs. When marginal costs go low, you have to have industries and businesses come together and blockchain competencies so that they can make their profits on the flow of activity 24/7. Let me give you an example. If you share a stock, you sell it. It's a small commission. Doesn't mean much. But when you have a 24/7 flow of stock, in a service, the revenue really does pick up. Some of the costs are getting so low, they're leading to near zero marginal cost as we move to markets and networks, and that's giving rise to the sharing economy. The sharing economy is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century. It's a remarkable event. Part of it's being absorbed into the capitalist market, which gave rise to it. Part of it is parallel, part of it is competitive, but it's not going away. You know, people say to me, well, zero marginal cost, isn't that in the future? And I'm amused by that because it's already here in a massive way. If we take a look at the communication internet and the World Wide Web, which is now 25 years old, we can get a good idea of how marginal cost affected that communication internet and now how it's going to affect energy, mobility, transport, and manufacturing. We have 3.5 billion people out there right now who are prosumers. That is, they're producing and sharing their own music, their own social media, their own news blogs, their own YouTube videos. They're producing and sharing all sorts of information on Wikipedia and creating the knowledge of the world. They're taking massive open online college courses taught by the best professors, best universities, and getting college credits. And so much of this is not in the GDP. It's not in the GDP. This is prosumers producing and sharing for each other at very low marginal cost. Now, whole industries have been disrupted. Music, entertainment, news, publishing. New businesses have emerged, not just Facebook, Google, and Twitter. There are thousands of profit and non-profit platforms. They're creating the analytics, the big data, the apps, and the programming. We thought there'd be a firewall, and while the near zero marginal cost would impact the virtual world, we didn't think it would move over to the physical world. What I'm saying in the Zero Marginal Cost Society book, the Internet of Things has broken the firewall. We now have millions of people producing their own solar and wind at near zero marginal cost. We have millions of young people in car sharing services, and soon those services will be autonomous and distributed, not centralized with Uber and Lyft. Let's go back to Germany. Here's where we stand now after 11, 12 years after that first conversation with the Chancellor. Over 35% of our electricity in Germany is now solar and wind at near zero marginal cost. We'll be at 100% off fossil fuels and nuclear by 2040, well before 2040. What's interesting is the fixed costs are plummeting. Some of you older folks remember that in the 1970s it cost about $78, the fixed cost of 1 solar watt, $78. This morning it's 38 cents. That's 1 watt fixed cost. In 15 months from now it's going to be down to 30 cents. It's an exponential curve, not dissimilar to what happened with Moore's law with the computer chip in the communication revolution. And what's interesting is we have now power and utility companies, many of them in my global group, who are buying 20-year contracts right now for solar and wind at 5 cents, 4 cents, 3 cents, and 2 cents a kilowatt hour. And here's what you're not told. I meet with the CEOs of power and utility companies all year round. Massive disruption in the boardroom. Because we now, Citibank did a report 2 years ago saying we now have $100 trillion in stranded assets in the fossil fuel industry. And Mr. Carney, the chairman of the Bank of England, told Lloyd's of London this year that this bubble of $100 trillion in stranded assets is the elephant in the room. And it's now coming to bear. So what's interesting, though, in Europe and China, once you pay the fixed cost for the solar and wind, the marginal cost is near zero. The sun has not sent us a bill. The wind has not invoiced us. They're nearly free on the marginal cost. So what happens in Europe and China when we begin to plug into a third industrial revolution infrastructure, and every business, for example, is able to use near zero marginal cost energy to manage, power, and move all of its goods and services across its value chains? How does the second industrial revolution infrastructure and country compete with that? Who's producing all the new energy? In Germany and around Europe, it's cooperatives. It's farmers, small businesses, local neighborhoods. This is a distributed revolution. They're producing 96% of all the new energy. The big four power companies in Germany, EnBW, RWE, E.ON, Vattenfall, they're producing 4% of the energy. They can't scale it. The sun shines everywhere. The wind blows everywhere. You have to collect it where your nodes are. Your nodes are those retrofitted buildings that become generation sites and the built environment around it. So this is power to the people, literally and figuratively, power to the people. Does this mean that this is the end of the power and utility industry? No, but they have to change their business model. And urban planners, this is important for you. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I debated Mr. Tyson at his request. We had a discussion. I said, look, you're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow, but you have to understand the disruption is here now, just like it happened to the publishing industry and the entertainment industry and the music industry. And so you have to be in two models at the same time. You have to be in a model that retires your stranded assets for the second industrial revolution energies while you create a new business model to bring you into the third industrial revolution. And in the new business model, you make money by generating no electricity. It's all going to be generated by cooperatives all over the world. It's already happening. We send the energy back to you. And you'll make more money by selling less electricity. He said, how do we do that? I said, you're going to set up partnerships with thousands of businesses. You're going to help manage the energy that flows through their value systems. You're going to help them mine the big data that's coming through the Internet of Things and help them with their analytics and algorithms so they can dramatically increase their aggregate efficiency and productivity, plunge their ecological footprint and marginal cost. In return, those thousands of businesses will share with you the gains in aggregate efficiency and productivity in performance contracts. 5 years ago, Mr. Tyson said no. Last year, he finally said yes. It was too late. He put his fossil fuel and nuclear power company on the market, no buyers, stranded assets. Moving now to services along the lines that we've said. All four power companies have taken the model that I suggested a half a decade ago. They're moving quickly as well in other countries. EDF and ERDF in France have joined our global team in northern industrial France. We're in our 5th year of deployment in the old industrial region of Haute France, and they're on the ground helping us lay out this infrastructure. So is it just Europe? No, now China. I was very pleased when President Xi and Premier Li came into office. Premier Li announced that he had read the Third Industrial Revolution book and instructed the National Development Reform Commission and the State Council to begin moving on the narrative I'm laying out to you urban planners here this morning. And they moved very quickly. I've been working with the leadership ever since. And let me show you how fast they go, their move. 11 weeks after my first visit there with the leadership, the state electricity grid announced $82 billion commitment in the current 5-year plan to digitalize the state grid, so that millions of Chinese people could buy solar and wind from their own companies, because they are the largest producers of solar and wind, and then send surplus back to the grid. So watch Europe, watch China. The coming together of a communication internet with the energy internet makes possible the automated GPS and driverless mobility internet. We built the whole world on making and selling cars in the 20th century, and here's the problem. The millennials don't want to buy cars. They want access to mobility in car-sharing networks, not ownership of vehicles in old-fashioned 20th century markets. But for every car those kids are sharing, we are eliminating 15 cars from production. So the new study suggests that we have 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in the world today. We're going to probably eliminate 800 million of them, 80% or more, in the next generation. Many countries are outlawing the internal combustion engine beginning around 2035. The remaining 200 million vehicles will be electric, they'll be fuel cell, they'll be powered by solar and wind electricity and other renewables. They will be autonomous, driverless, and made of 3D printed material. All of that's already emerging. Does this mean the end of the auto companies? Not necessarily, but they have to change their business model. I've been working with Daimler and Ford, brought us the second industrial revolution. So this is interesting. I'll share this quickly with you. A couple of years ago, Wolfgang Bernhard, the chairman of Daimler Trucks at the time, asked if I'd join him in Germany, and he said, we're going to introduce the mobility internet and bring journalists in from around the world. I laid out this narrative, and then Wolfgang got up and said, look, we have outfitted quietly 250,000 Daimler trucks with sensors. Nobody knew it. They're all on the expressways now in Europe. And those sensors on the outside of the trucks are turning the trucks into mobile data centers. They're picking up weather conditions. They're picking up data on traffic, warehouse availability, et cetera. And that big data will be used so Daimler can help thousands of businesses with their analytics and algorithms to dramatically increase their logistics and reduce their fixed and marginal costs and their ecological footprint. Smart. And those trucks are now able to automate into trains, mobile trains that are completely driverless on the road systems. They can do that right now. So all of this technology revolution will depend on the built environment and how urban planning puts together this nodal infrastructure in regions all around the world. Let me say that the key is to move from pilots to scale up. And I'm going to be very brutal here. And I understand that you'll understand this quite well, because I know that you're all frustrated as urban planners. We are tired of pilots. Pilots are not taking us where we need to go. So everybody can talk about their hydrogen bus they just bought, or their bicycle path system, or their Leeds building, but those are just pilots. The great revolutions are infrastructure revolutions, where you bring together in a concentrated mix communication, energy, mobility, and a new built environment. We have to scale. So Europe, we have announced Smart Europe. I'm working with the European Commission. I joined Vice President Šefčovič, the head of the Smart Europe and the Energy Union, and co-chair with Michael Bloomberg of Global Covenant Cities. And we announced Smart Europe last year. We have 740 billion euros to begin this scale out. In China, we have a plan called China Internet Plus. It's almost the same plan. Last thoughts. For urban planners, this revolution is not going to come from the nation state. This revolution is global, it's distributed, it's lateral, and it's going to emerge, as you know, in the cities, the regions. Not just the cities, because every city has to encompass and embed its rural regions in order to take its responsibility for the 19 kilometers of the biosphere in which it's embedded. So we're seeing an urban, rural, regional development where each region will have to create roadmaps, bringing together democratic assemblages across the regions, and then with this architecture in place, deploy this infrastructure. And this is what's going to create the new business opportunities, and it's going to require millions and millions of jobs. Robots and AI will not retire the stranded assets of the fossil fuel and nuclear industry. It's going to require lots of labor. And robots and AI will not dig down and put 5G cable under the ground. It's going to require millions of human beings. And robots and AI will not assemble wind turbines and put solar on your roof. It's going to require millions of workers. And robots and AI will not put in all of that retrofitted infrastructure in the built environment where every building has to be insulated. That's going to require millions of workers. Every industry is involved here. ICT, consumer electronics, transport, logistics, power and utility, advanced fabrication, manufacturing. So the plan that I'm talking about makes common sense. We have companies around the world engaged in it. What's missing now is we need dramatic movement in every urban and rural region to begin to create roadmaps. We have roadmaps we can show you in Europe. We have 3 regions that are our test centers, all of northern industrial France, which was chosen as the entrepreneurial region of Europe. We have 1,000 projects going there now, thousands of employees, new jobs. We have Netherlands from Rotterdam to The Hague, 23 cities, now moving toward billions of dollars of scale up. We have all of Luxembourg, the financial capital. So I would invite you to come to visit, and I would also like many of our folks in Europe to come and visit your cities, because you also have many attributes and best of show examples that we can use. We need the urban regions to begin working together so we can share with each other our best in show. So this is my hope. I think it's an uphill climb. I think we are late. We should have started this 30 years ago. But the human race is very resilient. We're the most social creature on the planet. We laid out a first and second industrial revolution in many countries in less than 40 years. We did it. We can do this in less than 40 years. But now we got to scale, and we got to create a political movement, and we need our urban planners to be at the center of that movement to give us, if you will, the beginnings of a roadmap for this transition so that our children and grandchildren have an earth to inherit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rifkin, for an inspiring keynote speech. We now have 10 minutes for questions from the audience. Dushko, maybe you would like to lead. Thank you.
I think we said we had 1 hour, so I think we have about 15 minutes.
15 minutes, excellent. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, okay. Mr. Rifkin, good morning, good evening, whatever it is. This is Duško Bogunović, the General Rapporteur. I'm not sure if you can see the stage or the audience.
I can see the audience.
You can see the audience, okay, that's more important. So this is, they're waving to you. This is a time for questions and answers. Can I just make one comment? This has been an avalanche of information, and I feel like we should just sit in silence for a minute or two and just kind of still digest. But anyway, let's go on. Amazing amount of information and an optimistic prospect. Thank you, because maybe my talk was a bit dark. So, do we have any questions, please? There must be a lot. I can't see very well. Sorry, I can see. Yeah. Martin Dubeling, the next president of Isocarp, has a question for you.
Mr. Rifkin, thank you very much for your excellent talk. I'm very much inspired. When it comes to the first, second, and third industrial revolution, and when it comes to urban and national and regional planning, can you share with us your thoughts on what we should do with regional planning and where we can expect the major developments? The first industrial revolution, as you said, it was in Great Britain and later taken over by other countries, wherever there was cheap coal. The second industrial revolution took place in the United States, as you said, because it was triggered by cheap Texas oil. When we're now planning regions and cities and nations, where will the and I think I know the answer, but I would like to hear it from you. Where will it take place? Where will the third industrial revolution will take place? We are now in Bodø, Norway, which is quite a remote but very charming location. Is the location of a city like Bodø, is that an asset or is that an or, can it be anywhere on the planet, or is it bound on the location?
I think that every urban and rural region, and again, you have to embed your urban environment into your rural environment, because every region of the world is going to have to be responsible for its 19 kilometers of the biosphere, from the stratosphere to the lithosphere. This is not going to happen by national governments. They can provide codes, regulations, and standards, But this localized, lateral, distributed, open, and transparent nodal infrastructure has to encompass urban to rural regions, because your rural regions are going to be a lot of the place where you preserve your biosphere for future generations. So every region's involved. Let me give you an idea of where we saw the problems. We did about 6 of these regional development plans from 2009 to 2012. They were okay. We did some small scale up. Then we realized what the problem was. We have to engage the entire community. So in the 3 regions we've worked with since 2012, we've developed a different model of planning. And I don't know if this is going to excite you or frighten you, but here's what we said. Northern industrial France, the Rust Belt, the old coal mining region, auto, steel. The president of the region came to my group, TIR Consulting. We have many of the world's major engineering companies and architects and economists, and they said, would you help do a plan with us? And I said, no, we won't do a plan for you, but the architecture of this third industrial revolution is not hard to grasp, the infrastructure, but we will work with you under one condition, that this entire region come together, all the municipalities, all the political parties, the entire business community, all the universities and the research institutes, and we're going to work with you. If you create a democratic assemblage, your urban planners will be there as the guides. Your urban planners will be there as the guides, but you're going to create democratic assemblages of all those groups, not focus groups, not stakeholders. That assemblage will involve thousands of people and 300 or 400 in your primary assemblages by vertical and horizontal committees. You will have industries there. You will then have verticals for resiliency, for circularity, for open and distributed platforms, and we'll work with you for a year. And you will come up with a customized plan over 5, 10, 15, and 20 years, a construction site with your urban planners as your guides and with us helping, and then you'll deploy. Now, there was a lot of cynicism. We've never seen this. How could you do this? Well, in 1 year, Northern Industrial France, Haute France, did this, and now they're in their 5th year of deployment as the lead entrepreneurial region of Europe, and thousands of jobs and over 1,000 projects. The same in Netherlands and Luxembourg. So what's missing here is urban planners have to be the guides, and your local and regional governments have to come together with the business community, the universities, and do the plans. We can share the last 3 roadmaps we've done. They're open source. If you go Jeremy Rifkin on the web, go to our website. These regional plans done by the people in these regions with the urban planners helping them, they're 150,000 word plans. They're 500 pages. They're totally integrated. And it shows you that if you give people the go-ahead across a region, citizens' juries, assemblages, they'll not only develop a plan, but they'll stay committed. The high schools, the universities, the families, because they'll see their region as their legacy for their children and grandchildren. Otherwise, this will not happen by just ministries vetting projects for little pilots. So this is the way to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Rifkin. We have another question over there.
Zeynep Enlil from Yıldız Technical University, Istanbul. Thank you very much for your very illuminating speech. I am wondering, at the beginning of your speech, you pointed out to this unequal distribution of wealth among 7 people in the whole world, and the 40% of the world getting $2 a day and so on. So I'm wondering, how are we going to overcome this inequality, and what do you think, or what do you foresee about digital divide, and how we as urban planners and regional planners can play a role in overcoming this? So I'd be very curious to know your viewpoint on this. Thanks.
On a technical level, these democratic assemblages that I just talked about in the regions are a great help, because when you bring a huge amount of players together for a year, and then they stay together in these assemblages year after year, they create a solidarity. And that solidarity speaks to all of the key issues, including inequality. Absolutely. And what we see is, among other things, the regions are saying we don't want a privatized grid controlled by internet companies or telecom companies or power companies. We want to make sure our platforms are open and that the data is controlled by the regions and the webs. The businesses can build to manage. They can't build to own. So this is the beginning. But I would say something else. It's not about just the technology. The technology's here, we can do it, but we need a change in consciousness quickly in one generation. And without that, we're not going to make it. I'm only guardedly hopeful, and I'll share 3 reasons. What I'm sensing among a younger generation in their 20s and 30s is a basic shift in the way they're defining their notion of freedom, power, and identity to community. And I think this shift is pretty fundamental if we can get there in time. Freedom. All of us in the room, we grew up to believe freedom is the ability to be independent, to be self-sufficient, not beholden on others, to be autonomous, to be an island to ourselves. And our government society has to ensure that every person has the right to do that. This is freedom as exclusivity, each of us on autonomous island. For the young people, what I've just said is death. They're all on their cell phones. They're in networks. They're Skyping around the world. 1.5 billion are in Facebook. For them, freedom is not exclusivity, it's inclusivity. It's not ownership, it's access. So for them, freedom is measured by the extent of the networks they're in, because the more networks they're in, the more the network effect increases the social capital of each individual. It's a completely different idea about freedom. They're changing their notion of power. Most of us older folks see power as pyramids from the one to the many through history. But an internet generation that's grown up with the network effect, they see power as lateral and not as vertical. And finally, and this is the most important part, these young people are shifting their notion of identity and community. You and I grew up in a geopolitical world. Each citizen is a citizen of a nation, and we're all sovereign. We compete with other citizens for scarce resources in the marketplace, zero-sum game. Our nation states compete with other nation states for scarce resources, marketplace, the battlefield, zero-sum game. These young people, though, are coming home now in the developing world and in the industrial world with biosphere consciousness, not geopolitics consciousness. They're beginning to realize that the biosphere is their basic home, that 19 kilometers that they share with their fellow citizens. And they're beginning to say to their parents, why are you using so much water, Dad, while you're shaving? We have drought and wildfires outside. Turn it off. Why is the TV on for 3 weeks in that room? No one's there. Turn it off. Why not get rid of one car and car share? And the one I'm particularly fond of, which I'll share with you, is my wife and I are involved in animal protection, animal rights issues, and we believe our fellow creatures have a right to be here with us or without us. We've got kids coming home and saying, where did this hamburger come from on my plate? Did it come from a rainforest? Did they have to cut down the trees to graze that cow for my burger? And if they cut down the trees, what happened to the rare animal species that exist only in that rainforest? Extinct. And if the trees aren't there to absorb the CO2 from industrial emissions, the temperature of the planet goes up so we can graze the cow. And some farmer can't feed her kids because she's got droughts, wildfires, and floods. So the kids are learning ecological footprint. They're learning that everything they do intimately affects another human, another community, another species, the planet we live in, our cycles and spheres. If we can get there in time, this change of consciousness is what's going to allow us to address inequality. We'll begin to see that in all of our distributed regions of the world, we are a species that has to take care of each other and our fellow creatures and the earth we live in. It's a huge uphill task. I'm only guardedly hopeful we can make it, but what I'd say to every urban planner in this room, it is your responsibility now to reach out with your expertise and bring in all those other players and make sure your government leaders don't kid them about little pilot projects. We got to scale this up.
Thank you very much. Fascinating answer. I think we have time for only one more question, so let's have this side of the room.
Yeah, I'm Alexander Boachimafu from Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. My question is, in the issue of globalization, I heard the speech concerning how Europe and America, China, but you realize that Africa is the home of most of the natural resources and the water bodies and also the carbon sinks. Where does it leave Africa as at the receiving end? And what should we as urban planners do to make sure that the systems here on this continent of about 54 countries is in place to make sure that the carbon sinks are in place to receive all the heat that is coming from Europe and America?
I'm glad you asked this question. You know, I went into conversations years ago with Conde Yamkela and UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, on what's the role of the emerging countries in this third industrial revolution. And UNIDO and the UN endorsed this third industrial revolution because here's what we realized. In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and in rural India, for example, we realized that their liability is their asset. Let me explain. We never saw in the business community a market for cell phones in the developing countries because there was no electricity. And then people started buying cell phones, even fake cell phones, just to show they had it. The cell towers came. And what we realized is that we misunderstood development. When I say that the liability is the asset, what I mean is you have no infrastructure. This is an asset because it's easy to build virgin, a new infrastructure along digital lines, than to transform an old second industrial revolution stranded asset and all the regulations that go with it and change it. It's quicker and faster if you start from scratch. So what we're seeing, as you know, in rural India and sub-Saharan Africa now is small cooperatives. Many of them women are operating them with microcredit, and they're going out in these rural areas in a major way in the last 2 years, and they're establishing microgrids. And what they're doing is they're leasing one solar panel for the roof, and you get a cell phone. The solar panel gives you light for your kids to study, and the cell phone is powered by that solar panel so that every week you give $1 to the credit union to keep your lease up. That's cheaper than kerosene, so you're not poisoning your family. And they can wire up 200 huts with the solar panels, which then become yours, and they can store it in a small battery container, and they can do 200 huts for $4,000 or $5,000. They are beginning to connect these microgrids region to region to region, and because they can move in a virgin infrastructure, they're moving online very quickly. So you remember when all the lights went out in India a couple years ago? It was the biggest power blackout in history. 700-800 million people without power. Well, guess what? In the rural areas, the power was still on in the microgrids. The churning machines, the fans, the electricity, it was all on. So again, this is an example where within 25 years from now, everyone should be producing their own solar and wind. We're now putting solar in paint in glass. It's going to be so cheap, it should be available to everybody, and wind as well in many areas. So this really is power to the people. This really is globalization. And again, the key here will be in the developing world will set a vast pace on this. India now is moving as quickly as China into solar and wind. So I'm guardedly hopeful. But again, I'm going to urge everybody in this room, we've got to scale. You should go to your city governments and your regions and say you're kidding yourself with your little lead building and your hydrogen bus and your bike routes. You're kidding yourself with a little smart here and a little smart there. The only way you're going to scale, tell them, is to be able to create a new governing model, a democratic assemblages, inviting entire groups of business, universities, research institutes to join you in doing these roadmaps. And when you see these 3 roadmaps we have on our website, Jeremy Rifkin, go to the website. They're free. They're open. You will see an amazing thing, that entire communities created the most sophisticated, integrated roadmaps with everything from economic planning to social justice, and they did it in a year, and they're deploying. So I hope you will take advantage of this, and I would like to invite all the urban planners in this room and regional planners, come and visit our 3 regions in Europe, our test regions. northern France, the 23 cities in the Netherlands and Luxembourg. And we would also like to have our regions come and visit you to see what you're doing if you're beginning to scale up in your region, so we can create, if you will, a global body with urban planners and regional planners all over the world working together so that we can begin to bring this message of hope, guarded hope, to this generation and begin the difficult task and the challenge of actually transforming our society to create a more ecological civilization. We don't have an alternative here. We've got to move quickly, and we've got to move now.
Fascinating. Mr. Rifkin, I'm sure you're aware we're out of time now for no more questions, so I guess I just want to tell you how much we appreciate your contribution to our Congress. This has been a fascinating encounter, and I'm sure this morning will remain memorable till the end of the event. I can only say if during the next 3 days, if you suddenly feel an urge to, oh, I didn't tell you this, please call us back anytime. It's a very tight schedule, but we will find a few minutes for you again. On behalf of on behalf of the delegates in the room and the society, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us this morning. Thank you.
It was a privilege being with you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Good conference.
Well, thank you very much to Mr. Rifkin, and thank you very much to our excellent speakers at this first plenary session. Before I send you off to the coffee break, I have just a few small messages to communicate to you. We have a Congress app. I know that some of you have experienced problems with either downloading the app or opening the app. At the registration area, we have two guys also accepting your presentations, but you can go to them and they will help you with the app. There's also an email address, but I think I would just go to my two colleagues and they will help you. And once you have access to the app, please upload your pictures also on other social media platforms. And please use the hashtag Isocarp or the hashtag Cool Planning or a third hashtag Visit Bodø. On Thursday evening, we will, this is a bit of a competition, so we will actually have three best pictures to be announced Thursday at dinner. And also dinner, speaking of dinner, for tonight there is a dine-around, but please register also in the app for the dine-around so the restaurants know how many people will be where at what time. It takes only a second, and if you enter the app under today's program, you will be able to just quickly click where you are headed. And the next message is that today at 5 p.m. there's an Isocarp open forum. It's open to everyone, and this is a place where you can come and learn more about Isocarp, the organization. So you're all very welcome to attend this meeting. The third thing is tonight at 9 p.m. there is a get-together party at the Hundholmen Brewery. They also brewed a beer especially made for you guys, so I hope you all have the chance to stop by and try the official Isocarp beer. It's never been made before, so please try to find time. Thank you.